American Government 2.1, the Pre-Revolutionary Period and the Roots of the American Political Tradition. Learning Objectives. By the end of this section, you will be able to identify the origins of the core values in American political thought, including ideas regarding representational government. Summarize Great Britain's actions leading to the American Revolution. American political ideas regarding liberty and self-government did not suddenly emerge full-blown at the moment the colonists declared their independence from Britain. The varied strands of what became the American Republic had many roots, reaching far back in time and across the Atlantic Ocean to Europe. Indeed, it was not new ideas but old ones that led the colonists to revolt and form a new nation. Political thought in the American colonies. The beliefs and attitudes that led to the call for independence had long been an important part of colonial life. Of all the political thinkers who influenced American beliefs about government, the most important is surely John Locke, who is pictured here in Figure 2.2. The most significant contributions of Locke, a 17th century English philosopher, were his ideas regarding the relationship between government and natural rights, which were believed to be God-given rights to life, liberty, and property. Locke was not the first Englishman to suggest that people had rights. The British government had recognized its duty to protect the lives, liberties, and property of English citizens long before the settling of its North American colonies. In 1215, King John signed Magna Carta, a promise to his subjects that he and future monarchs would refrain from certain actions that harmed or had the potential to harm the people of England. Prominent in Magna Carta's many provisions are protections for life, liberty, and property. For example, one of the document's most famous clauses promises no freeman shall be taken, imprisoned, or in any way destroyed, except by the lawful judgment of his peers or by the law of the land. Although it took a long time for modern ideas regarding due process to form, this clause lays the foundation for the Fifth and Sixth Amendments to the Constitution, while Magna Carta was intended to grant protections only to the English barons, who were in revolt against King John in 1215. By the time of the American Revolution, English subjects, both in England and in North America, had come to regard the document as a cornerstone of liberty for men of all stations, a right that had been recognized by King John I in the year 1215, but the people had actually possessed long before then. The rights protected by Magna Carta had been granted by the king, and in theory, a future king or queen could take them away. The natural rights Locke described, however, had been granted by God and thus could never be abolished by human beings, even royal ones, or by the institutions they created. So committed were the British to the protection of these natural rights that when the royal Stuart dynasty began to intrude upon them in the 17th century, Parliament removed King James II, already disliked because he was Roman Catholic, in the Glorious Revolution, and invited his Protestant daughter and her husband to rule the nation. Before offering the throne to William and Mary, however, Parliament passed the English Bill of Rights in 1689. A Bill of Rights is a list of the liberties and protections possessed by a nation's citizens. The English Bill of Rights, heavily influenced by Locke's ideas, enumerated the rights of English citizens and explicitly guaranteed rights to life, liberty, and property. This document would profoundly influence the U.S. Constitution and Bill of Rights. Please copy down: a Bill of Rights is a list of the liberties and protections possessed by a nation's citizens. American colonists also shared Locke's concept of private property rights. According to Locke, anyone who invested labor in the commons, the land, forests, water, animals, and other parts of nature that were free for the taking, might take as much of these as needed. By cutting trees, for example, or building a fence around a field, the only restriction was that no one could take so much that others were deprived of their right to take from the commons as well. In the colonists' eyes, all free white males should have the right to acquire property, and once it had been acquired, government had the duty to protect it. The rights of women remained greatly limited for many years. Perhaps the most important of Locke's ideas that influenced the British settlers of North America were those regarding the origins and purpose of government. Most Europeans of the time believed the institution of monarchy had been created by God, and kings and queens had been divinely appointed to rule. Locke, however, theorized that human beings, not God, had created government. People sacrificed a small portion of their freedom and consented to be ruled in exchange for the government's protection of their lives, liberty, and property. Locke called this implicit agreement between a people and their government the social contract. Should government deprive people of their rights by abusing the power given to it, the contract was broken and the people were no longer bound by its terms. The people could thus withdraw their consent to obey and form another government for their protection. The belief that government should not deprive people of their liberties and should be restricted in its power over citizens' lives was an important factor in the controversial decision by the American colonies to declare independence from England in 1776. For Locke, withdrawing consent to be ruled by an established government and forming a new one meant replacing one monarch with another. For those colonists intent on rebelling, however, it meant establishing a new nation and creating a new government, one that would be greatly limited in the power it could exercise over the desire to limit the power of government is closely related to the belief that people should govern themselves. This core tenet of American political thought was rooted in a variety of traditions. First, the British government did not allow for a degree of self-government. Laws were made by Parliament, and property-owning males were allowed to vote for representatives to Parliament. Thus, Americans were accustomed to the idea of representative government from the beginning. For instance, Virginia established its House of Burgesses in 1619. Upon their arrival in North America a year later, the English separatists who settled the Plymouth colony, commonly known as the Pilgrims, promptly authored the Mayflower Compact, an agreement to govern themselves according to the laws created by the male voters of the colony. By the 18th century, all the colonies had established legislatures to which men were elected to make the laws for their fellow colonists. When American colonists felt that this long-standing tradition of representative self-government was threatened by the actions of Parliament and the King, the American Revolution thus began.